Resurrection Sunday. He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
We are here after Resurrection Sunday, and we concluded a series on Peter, specifically during Jesus' trial, time in the garden, his trial, and then fast forwarded post-resurrection to really look at Jesus through the lens of Peter. And man, there's so much for us to learn in Scripture. Scripture is alive and active as you read it, when you read it, where you read it. God does want to speak to you, to me, to us individually and collectively, unifying us as one under Jesus, who is our head. So welcome back to Dive Deep. If you're returning, if this is your first time, man, it is great to have you here. We would love to interact with you, whether it's in the comments or via email with questions. Send a question into mike.swigert@cwc.life. And so good to be here together, Pastor Branden. And
yeah, it's good to see you wearing the same thing as you did last week.
Crazy.
But why
crazy.
not? Why
yeah.
not, right?
But we finished up by talking about Jesus reinstating Peter. So let's just a quick recap. Peter was in the garden with Jesus, fell asleep, sliced off the ear of someone that was there. Yeah, Malchus that was there. Then he trailed behind, ran off, then trailed behind. And people were like, "Hey, we know you. We hear your accent. Aren't you one of Jesus' guys?" And he's like, Nope. And then second time, a third time, Jesus predicted this. It happened. And there was this laser gaze from Jesus on Peter. And Peter can't imagine all that he felt in that moment. Fast forward, Jesus performs a miracle in front of Peter and 6 other disciples. They have breakfast. Simply time and relationship with Jesus while he's revealing himself and affirming who he is to his guys who are going to carry the word forward, and he's going to continue to work in and through. And then at that same moment, John, in John chapter 21, continues by saying, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Let's talk about this section, Pastor Branden. What hits you about Jesus and Peter's conversation?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I guess I've always seen this scripture as Jesus pulling Peter aside. The overarching 30,000-foot view of this section is, all right, they're done eating. Now, Jesus looks right at Peter in the presence of the other disciples who knew Peter denied, who knew some of the failures of Peter. Jesus now publicly is reinstating Peter in front of the disciples.
John records, verse 21:15, when they had finished eating, this is John kind of prepping the scene, Jesus said to Simon Peter. Okay, that's who he's talking to. Then Jesus' words in red, Simon, son of John. It's interesting that he doesn't say, "Hey, Rock." Like, he doesn't use his nickname. He talks directly to the core of him.
Yeah.
Post-resurrection and also post-denial. Talk about like the repetition of question.
Yeah. So, asked 3 times. So you just go through these. Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. So the first question is, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Mm-hmm. And again, that word love is transformed, is like an agape love, where Peter responds with a phileo love, which is a brotherly love. So it's just an interesting thing, because when Jesus used this word love here, that culture didn't have a word for this type of love. Their highest level of love at this point was the phileo love, which is, I'm going to lay down my life for my brother. They didn't even have a word for, I'm going to lay down my life for my enemy, because it's a different type of love. And so first of all, it's a call to a deeper love than what Peter was understanding here. And so, do you love me more than these? So there's actually 2 thoughts here. Is he could have been pointing to the ship and the nets and like the fishing equipment. Do you love me more than these? Your livelihood? Because I'm going to ask you to give up your livelihood. We know Peter was married as well. And so you're going to be giving up your life for me when I say, follow me, here coming up. This is what it's going to mean. Or when he was around the fire, do you love me more than these? Do you love me more than they love me? Or do you, because remember earlier on, and I think Mark records this, or earlier in John, really records that Jesus was talking with Peter, and Peter was like, they are all going to leave you, but I never will. Mm-hmm. And so Jesus here is saying, do you really? Because last you said that, but then you denied me 3 times. And so he was kind of like thinking back on Peter's words here. Do you love me more than these? You said you did. Mm-hmm. And so there's 2 kinds of thoughts there. And so whatever one you want to take here, I read that it was left vague so that we could apply it to our own life. Mm-hmm. But basically, it means, are you going to leave your livelihood for my sake? Mm-hmm. And is your love stronger than the rest of these disciples here?
Yeah, it's an interesting contrast. And I wonder, questions that come to my mind to this passage of Scripture are relative to like, okay, what was the pace of this conversation? You know, right. What went through Peter's mind that Jesus had just prior recreated a moment that was around a fire. Yeah. When Peter was around a fire, when he denied Jesus. Yeah. And I wonder what hit Peter's mind. Like, I think it's easy, or I should say, personally, when I would read or hear this passage of Scripture, I would hear that same ardent, like, of course, Lord, you know I love you. Yeah. And regardless of how he responded, it just makes me think, like, I wonder how he thought back to, like, ooh, I know what I just said a little bit ago. So let me...
It was only a couple days before.
Right. And so I wonder how he had more gravity in his response than just a quick, like, this is what's on the surface. This is the icing, you know? Yeah. And like, I do love you, Lord, you know? Mm-hmm. And 2, talking about, like, I wonder what Jesus might have been pointing out where Peter was essentially swayed by these, not the disciples, but the people that were around him in his denials.
Right.
You know, and Peter uses the phileo word, but Jesus uses agape. So, like, do you agape me more than these? And he's like, of course I phileo you. And right. Real quick, I mean, Philadelphia, city of brotherly love. That's where the word, you know, so, but like, just kind of that, like, because Jesus goes, do you agape? Do you agape? And then he goes, do you phileo me? Mm. Oh, like, it just makes me wonder, like, what went through Peter's mind where Jesus is like, there is nothing more important than, like what you're saying, Peter's surrender to Jesus and Peter's friendship with Jesus. Yeah. You know, like, that's just so powerful. And also the opportunity. Like, talk about the opportunity. Like, Jesus didn't have to ask him this question, but he did.
Yeah, I don't think Jesus did it for Jesus. I think Jesus is doing this moment for Peter to hear Peter's words here. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Basically, to give him the confidence to then the next command that Jesus says, okay, feed my lambs. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so there's a reinstatement here. There's a mission here. There's a task here. Uh-huh. This reinstatement is going to come with a calling on your life. Uh-huh. And you need to hear yourself say out loud that you love me.
Yep. Yeah.
Because you're going to be persecuted, that you're going to have a love for your persecutors like the way I loved my persecutors. Which was out of the realm of thinking prior to Jesus here.
Right.
And so I think when you hear something out loud, when you hear yourself say something, I think there's power in that, which is why I believe one of the reasons Jesus had this scene with Peter is, and just think of the personality that Jesus chose to be the rock. You know, with Peter and all of his failures. But now is like, you're going to be my rock, Peter. Like, you're going to be the rock of my church. And so I need you to tell others, yourself, that you love me. Because you need to feed my lambs.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, like, just a note on commentary from a Wesley commentary says how Jesus used agape, as you're saying, the stronger term, and twice Peter replied with phileo.
Phileo, yeah.
The weaker term. Then Jesus accommodated Peter's question, not demanding the highest love of Peter because he was not yet capable of giving it. It's just interesting how, like, just in this reflection, it's like, okay, Jesus met Peter where Peter thought he was responding appropriately, and he was like, okay, let's talk about us here, and let's build on that. So just how that speaks to the fact of God wanting to work with us. Well, God wanting to work right where we're at as we respond to him, as he meets us right where we're at,
It is interesting, the whole progression of all of this, because Jesus gives a command here, feed my lambs, which is interesting here when we have this next one, because he said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? So the same thing, again, that agape love. You know that I love you. And so again, that was a phileo love there. Then Jesus said, take care of my sheep. It's interesting because lambs and sheep here are different words. And so lambs signifying the young believer, those who have just come to Christ.
Yep.
You need to feed them. You need to help them. But also this take care of my sheep. So feed my lambs, because they need the word. Feed them and then take care of them. Now that they have fed, now that they are more mature sheep now, make sure you take care of them.
Makes me wonder what went through John's mind, like as he's writing, later in 1 John about like the younger men and the older men, and like just this spiritual growth dynamic for the early church. But yeah, that's really fun. So I guess maybe what's a thought as a takeaway or a response to this passage of the word that hits your mind?
A response to the whole scene?
this whole scene.
Well, I think it's a call to pastors and ministers on how to shepherd a flock, that there's going to be new believers in your midst, and there's going to be those more mature believers in your midst. And you're going to be called to feed and take care of the church and the discipleship process that you need to help. I think that's a huge call from my pastor's lens. Too. Almost like the original pastor of, the calling of a pastor here was put on Peter is what, pastor, shepherd, same deal here. And so I look at it from the eyes of, we need to take care of God's church. There's a high calling on us as pastors to make sure we are not only seeing new converts, but we are also knowing that we need to take care of those who are the more mature ones, using the lambs and the sheep. And so right off the bat, that's kind of, what my mind as a pastor goes to. And then, of course, the third time, Peter's like getting angry at this point. And then Jesus says again, feed my sheep. So he kind of combines feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, and feed my sheep. Basically noting, just take care of my church, Peter. You need to take care of the new believers and the mature believers and teach them so that they all can grow in their relationship with Jesus. So I think that first part is for all of us, for sure, that we need to be taking care of each other. But I think it's a high calling for the pastors and who God has chosen to look after the flock. We have a team of pastors here who have different circles of care, which is really great. And so our church is very fortunate to have multiple shepherds who can speak into a little bit differently. And so I think it's a calling for shepherds and pastors, but also to everybody is, hey, we're all in the same flock here.
Right.
We need to take care of each other.
Yeah. And I think it's relationally powerful how Jesus provides that, okay, you denied me 3 times, or just, kind of that Peter denied Jesus 3 times. And then here's this response to where like, okay, no matter what anyone's history or past is, like there's that opportunity for redemption, so long as there's breath in your lungs, to turn back and follow Jesus. Not that someone would choose that, because Paul writes about that in Romans, but just that Jesus is like, hey, let's talk about restoration. Let's talk about healing. Let's talk about what new looks like, so that you can be faithful forward. And not stay stuck in failure. Yeah,
as a whole, it's, hey, you might have failed in your life, but there's still a calling on your life to follow Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that he can stand in the gap of your sin, of where, like, if you failed, don't let that be a reason for you to run from God's purpose in your life.
Right.
But run to God's purpose, because he has the power to reinstate all of us when we've kind of strayed away.
Yeah. Yeah. Choose him and chase him. Jesus.
Choose him and chase him.
Yeah. So happy Resurrection Weekend. We would love to, like I said, interact with you in the comments, via email, but he is risen, and
he's risen indeed.
Yes. And he's alive, and wants to speak to each one of us. So if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, please give us a call, send us an email, whatever form of communication is great. We would love to talk with you about what it looks like to know Jesus and walk with him and talk with him, because he wants to make us look more like himself, to have life to the full, and to believe and not doubt and become a new person. So if you're wrestling with something, or there's something kind of in your heart as you're watching or listening, and you're like, man, I need Jesus, please, we want to talk to you. So don't hesitate to reach out, and he's near. We're going to be starting a new series next week. So we hope to see you here, and we will continue the conversation with a different topic. Come back next week and you'll find out what it is. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.